Coming up on the Together for Good podcast, I sit down and talk with my friend, the Reverend Alex LaChapelle. He's a pastor in Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. We met at a theology conference earlier this year, but he's really smart and really good at talking about the themes within Lutheran theology and how it relates to everyday life. And so I really like talking with Alex about these things and thought we should just record it so that other people can enjoy it too. I think Alex and I are going to record lots of these because we had a ton of fun. So I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Welcome to the Together for Good podcast, a podcast created by Bethany Lutheran Church in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, and hosted by me, Pastor Nate Preisinger. On Together for Good, our goal is to provide practical, engaging content that supports you without expectations. Whether you're feeling disconnected from traditional religion or simply exploring what faith means in your life, we're here to walk alongside you. No matter where you are on your journey of faith, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Together for Good.
Welcome, everybody, to the Together for Good podcast. I'm on a Teams call with my friend, Alex LaChapelle. He is the pastor of Prince of Peace Lutheran Church in Harvey, Michigan. That's in the UP, correct, Alex?
Upper Peninsula.
The Upper Peninsula. And you and I met last January at the Crossings Conference in St. Louis, which was super fun. I think you and I kind of bonded because we sat together in the front row to pay attention, but then also to make snide comments to one another. We picked it up really quick. It was great. And I really appreciated that.
And I think like with the conference, especially as somebody who's attended, because that was your first time, right?
That was my first time, yeah.
And that was my second time. So I was like, ooh, we got fresh meat. Because our ability to join that conference dropped the median age like another at 40 years old, our ages dropped them like 20 years. So it was like, I was like, oh, this is exciting. There's new faces in the crowd that are saying things like, as a pastor at versus when I retired from pastoring. And it's like, I'm not discounting you, but I do want to hear some living perspectives that offer up, like, I saw this in my pulpit, I saw this in my church, especially as leadership, because I'm not saying like they do center themselves on lay preaching and lay faith understandings, and I think that's a big part of the conversation we want to have today. But I also recognize that there's so much good work that needs to be done between pastor to pastor conversations around preaching and studying and like what is law and gospel and what is Lutheranism in the right now, that sometimes I feel like I am caught where if I'm with a bunch of colleagues who are much older than me, they want to tell me about 1980s church. And I was like, I bet it was awesome.
Yeah.
Because it's not like that anymore. And yet at the same time, they have stuff that I'll be like, that's a good idea, or that's helpful, thank you. But sometimes it's like, I remember campus ministry, because I do Northern Michigan University campus ministry quarter time as well. And somebody was like, when I was at North Dakota, we used to have 300 students. And I was like, I feel just shame. Yeah. But then I'm also like, North Dakota 1980s campus ministry and Northern Michigan University's 2025 campus ministry, they're not even going to see each other and understand each other, because it's like, just pull out your cell phones, everybody. And 1980s campus ministry be like, what are you talking about? Like, that's reserved for the government. And like, now it's like,
no,
I've got
totally
two.
Right. And I appreciate you saying, like, this conference that we went to, like, Crossings is amazing. And it's what I want to talk with you about. And like the theology and the commitment to a real Lutheran theological understanding of preaching and the importance of preaching.
Right.
It is so important. And you're right, like looking around that room, I think the reason I gravitated towards sitting next to you is like, oh, this guy, he's about the same age as me, and like he's not taking himself too seriously. And that's why I gravitated towards you in the front row there. I was like, okay, like this is a person that that'll put up with my jokes while we're talking through all this stuff. But you're right, like to have the groundedness in what's happening in a congregation today. And the ELCA is diverse in that sense, at least, of rural, suburban, urban, and like there's these pockets where the church is still super strong, aka Minnesota. And then there's the rest of the country where we're all kind of trying to figure it out. Well, and I should even say, right, like I did most of my ministry, start of my ministry is all on the East Coast, which I just say, like, it is just a godless wasteland. Nobody goes to church anymore. And then even coming out to Denver, it's like, oh, wow, like people still care about this. This is kind of fun, but still nothing like Minneapolis at this point in time.
And you're not getting that church to church. I mean, Denver probably has a little bit of church to church where you go and like Denver area's got multiples, but it's, I mean, especially even here in the Upper Peninsula, we have a shortage of pastors, and yet there's all these Lutheran churches right up against each other where the question mark comes again. Do we need to center a church and have a larger reach rather than having church? And they're all going like, we are looking for a quarter-time pastor who is willing to take an eighth pay. And you're like, who do you think you're going to get? We're like, we're hoping for Jesus Christ. But, and I think it's such a good like illustration to say what they're really asking is, I don't want to die, which I think actually is a large law conversation about how do I maintain the eternal nature of my church? And then we're like, the eternal nature of your church is actually tied to the body of Christ, not the church of Christ. Because if that's what you're hoping for is like, I need this brick and mortar to stay alive, we're already in so much trouble. Like, but if you can start to have the conversation, the church is going to be fine if it's the body of Christ. But if it's the building of Christ, 30-year roof, you got 30 years.
You're so right. And it's that type of perspective that I think is so pernicious for all of us, right? Like whether it's us relating to our church or just our own understanding of the world, like we just want it to be the way it always was, you know, the way we cooked up in our heads that when it was the best. The 1980s was this golden era in the church when everything was wonderful. And I'm sure if you talk to a pastor in the 1980s, when they're going through, they're like, no, it's really hard right now, and I wish this was better, and I wish that was better. But we cook it up in our heads. It's like, no, that's the golden age, and we just have to hold on to it. And really what it speaks to me about is a continual lack of trust as well as a lack of imagination, of just of zooming out and seeing that the church is going to be fine and that it's something bigger than an isolated moment. But we have so much trouble breaking out of that. Yeah, you're thinking about it. Go ahead, push back.
No, there's so I think it's an inversion though. And I didn't think about it until you said it like that. Okay, you talk to the 1980s pastor and you know what he probably says is, we have so many people, but so many of them don't actually understand what church is really for. And if they could understand what church is for, we could do so much more. And then you insert us with a lot of smaller churches or even being claimed as a dying church. And then we're going, if I could help these people understand what church is really for, then we could really make a difference. And it's like, I think it's actually the same conversation because church even now, I think, is full of people who are buying into some of this law gospel stuff that I think Crossings is trying to put out there of this law is going to free, or this gospel is going to free you from this law of limitation. And yet there's still a lot of people at church going like, just tell me I'm good enough. Tell me that it's going to be okay. And
or show me how to be good enough. What do I need to do?
And 80s church was full of that too. But it just, there was so much more people. So even the voice box was probably almost overwhelming saying, we've got 200, I'm thinking of churches like the church that I'm at now, we probably worship between 40 and 60. That's like our solid number that shows up. And then we have like some rises and falls. But there was 150 back in the day. So when it was 150 people, having another, 90 spaces sitting in church saying things like, well, we're doing good enough. Look at us. it probably helped negate some of the depth conversations of law. And now we're getting in these conversations where people like, we just need like another 20, 30 people to show up. And that weirdly negates some of the depth conversations that we need to have, that depth of the law to push us to some conversations about, what happens when we actually give up in that law space and say, I don't think there's anything I can do to save myself. Romans 7 just a couple weeks ago, like,
Yep.
what a wretch am I? Who will save me from this? Thanks be to God for Jesus Christ, and it's like,
Yeah.
Paul lays it out so perfectly that once we kind of give up and take that big sigh, then Jesus has been there the whole time going like, you're okay.
Yeah.
You were white knuckling. So the white knuckling 80s church was like, we're the most powerful. And then I think nowadays we're seeing the church go like, how do we get so powerless? And yet the same conversation applies, like, kill your ego, like,
Yeah.
be
No,
present.
I love the direction you're going with that, of recognizing that it's variations on the same theme, but they still play out, right? Like,
Because it's
just
survival.
whether you're on the top or whether you're just white knuckling it to survive, it's kind of the same theme again and again, just in an inverted way. Well, and let's back up to help some of our listeners to kind of understand where we're going with this. So you're mentioning law, you're mentioning gospel, and this is what I really want to talk to you about. This is a big part of what Crossings is trying to do, is just to say like, hey, this is a very core Lutheran understanding of how the scriptures work. And Martin Luther wrote about this ad nauseum, and people since then have written about it too, of just that the scripture is filled with law, which convicts us, and gospel, which frees us. And you need both. And the problem is we tend to love the law more than we realize. And we don't, like, we think like, oh, like, I don't like all the rules, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. Like, the law is a little more expansive than just the rules. It's also just the sense of like, I can do it on my own. I can save myself. Go ahead. Like, how do you explain this, quickly, law and gospel, to just your confirmation class, or right? Like, well, you're just kind of trying to help
Yeah.
people entry point into it.
So I think the thing to attach to what you just said too is we have this love of the law more than we realize, but we also have this love of the gospel as law. So we'll go like, I'm a love of Christ guy. Like, all that love of Jesus for me sets me free, because we have to love our neighbor as ourselves. We have to go to church. We have to, and this is all because God loves us. And you're like, if you're doing something as a because and a have to, you've actually put it all back on the law side. Like, it's the invitation. And so for me, I think when I'm talking to like, I'll go back to high school, because I went to a Lutheran high school. I grew up in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So my Lutheran high school explanation from senior year that I still hold fast to is the law has three uses. It curbs us from our wrongdoings. It's a mirror to show us our wrongdoings and also just our failure. But that third one is a guide. And I used to fight that one. I don't know what that means. What does that even mean? I think the law actually lays out some good understandings of how you might live in community with your neighbor, which,
Yeah.
if you look at the Good Samaritan, is who's my neighbor? Well, it's everybody, especially even the ones that we don't want to be neighbors with. So then where's the gospel? And it's like, the gospel is the person and work of Jesus Christ, which, again, growing up in a more conservative church, was still you need Jesus' death to free you from all these things. And I need Jesus' life to free me from everything. And Jesus' life, the way that Jesus lived, even to the point of death, that when the world and Rome and everybody was like, we're going to kill this guy because he's ruining our status quo.
Yeah.
And then God says, via Jesus, via themselves, even death won't separate me from loving you. That to me is the gospel narrative that I really hold on to, is that the love of Christ is seen in the resurrection, because death was when we try to snuff out God's perfect love and hope for the world and hope for us, the resurrection shines through and says, I will continue to claim you even at your worst, which I would say is when we put Jesus to
Yeah.
death and tried to snuff out what God was hoping for the world.
And there's so much in the crucifixion narrative. That's the part that always compels me, where it's clear that it is God in human form, incarnate in the person Jesus, taking on the worst of what human life has to offer as well.
Right.
Right? Betrayed by a friend, abandoned by a close disciple, intense suffering, grave injustice. Like it's all there in the whole narrative. And it's also like on top of the fact that it the I crucified thee. What song is that? That's like one of the Lenten hymns or the Good Friday hymns, right? Like that we're a part. Like we're all supposed to kind of see our own sinfulness in doing this to
Right.
the Son of God. Yeah. And
Are you
so go ahead.
Are you a 7 last words guy, or have you ever done anything with the 7 last words?
Yeah, we do a 7 last words here.
I think that's been one of the most uplifting things. And I started doing 7 last words on my first call, where we actually did Joseph Haydn's 7 last words. So we had all the music, and then
Yep.
we attached a little 1 to 2 minute homily to everyone. And we also did it as a multiple denominational experience. And so we even had like there's a Christian Scientist chapter in our community, and so he would take one of the words, and I would take one, and the Catholics would take one, and the Presbyterians would take one. And so between all this beautiful music, we would also have someone read a word, and then they would respond to it and say, this is my quick 1 to 2 minute synopsis of what I think is happening here. And so I took that, and then I took out Joseph Haydn, and I just put in hymnody that I thought was appropriate for each song, or each of the words. And then I did some preaching with a colleague where he and I switched off and did the same 1 to 2 minutes. And then this year I actually read an excerpt from a book that I have that has little excerpts from like King and other prominent voices in and outside of the church that I read as responses to the 7 last words. But when you read those 7 last words, which I've been doing now for quite a while since starting as a pastor, I find that it's the same thing you said. It's Father, forgive them. It's the reacclimating family. It's the it is finished, which I don't think is a I'm dead as much as it is finished. You don't have to worry anymore, which I always use Chronicles of Narnia as like the it is finished is like a message of hope in the midst of a battle, right? They're all fighting for Narnia, and then the lion announces it is finished, which I think is words of respite for those children made warriors in the midst of carnage, right? Like, and so when when you start to look at those 7 last words, a lot of them again hold up all that suffering that lays in front of us of like, what did Jesus die for? And it's like, it's not Jesus died because you're a wretch. Jesus died because we have a wretchedness that's seemingly all around us, so that it's hard for us to, I think, become the divinity that God has kind of professed we are from the very beginning, which is God creates humanity and says it's very good. Doesn't say it's probably not going to work out or it's probably going to fail. It says God said, look, very good. And I think like the Celtics were the best at holding on to this, that God actually does think very highly of us as creation. Whereas I think sometimes Lutheranism gets sold to people as we think very little of our humanity. And it's not actually as true as we think that we've known for a long time that we are inevitably going to fail. So let's create some understanding of when you fail, you have to have something that allows you to not freak out.
Yeah, well, and that's and this is where I think the Lutheran witness is so important and compelling in this day and age, because so much just tells us that the only reason your life isn't better is because you haven't tried hard enough, or you haven't found the right life hack that's going to put it all into place, right? Like there is just this deluge of information, short form video out there that tells you that you can fix it. and you try, like it's so compelling. I fall into it all the time myself. I'm like, oh yeah, like I found, like I don't know who this guy is, but I found this video and it's like really slick. And now I'm gonna like go to bed at 10 and wake up at 5 and be a master of my own universe. And it works for 3 days. And then when it doesn't work on the 4th day, I fall deeper into despair. I was like, wait a second, like, oh, the problem is me. Like, why can't I do this, right? Like, why can't I just stick to it? And that's all throughout the scripture, right? Like I love those lines from Paul, like I do the very thing that I hate to do. Like clearly this is nothing new where people just struggle to hold it all together. But that's also where the gospel's so important. It's like, yeah, like you can't hold it all together. And it's not because you're wretched, like you're saying, but it's like the wretchedness of existence as a whole. I don't know, like, yeah, how would you nuance that? Because I think that's a really important point.
Well, and I think it's, what did Luther is so tricky because you have some of the most ridiculous statements that have caused some of the most pain throughout, like the things we apologize for. Some of them are like Luther statements that empowered Nazism or attacks on Mennonites and all these things. But I think Luther had something really good, and that's his ability to say it's sin, death, and the devil. And actually, for me, if sin becomes separation from myself, God, and others, then it's not the wretchedness of me, it's the wretchedness of us or the wretchedness around us, so that maybe something's not about like you did something wrong, but actually anything that pulls us apart from God, ourselves, and our neighbors can be viewed as sin. It doesn't even have to be your actions. So like a good example for me is war. I'm not fighting in the war. I've not picked up a gun and have emerged into these other countries and have fired at people, but I can fully recognize the sin that is war because it has created more distance from these other people that we are going after, that are killing us, that we are killing. I see, the Palestine, Israel, the, the Russia, Ukraine. The sin of it isn't who's right or who's wrong. The sin of it is that war makes us further distance from one another. And I think in a way, further distance from God, because God's hope is what? That we would live in a harmonious love for one another. If one of the major commandments is love the Lord your God with all your heart, and the second so close to it, love your neighbor as yourself, war is doing not that. So therefore, sin isn't because you shoot the gun or because you wage war. War is sin because even in the most justified war, which you could argue might be World War II, it's still sin because it was a distancing of ourselves from one another.
Yeah.
Even when it was in service to, it still was completely laden with a separation of seeing somebody as enemy and less than or deserving of death. I think that to me, that's the stuff that we do as sin, is we use it to say, why is death bad? And you're like, well, because when someone dies, I feel far from them. So the sin of death isn't how they died or what killed them. It's that if I cease to exist, like it's way harder for you to do this with me. So I'm going to feel far from you. So your grief isn't sin, your anger isn't sin, your sadness isn't sin, but the sin that is causing all these emotions isn't because I did it or you did it or somebody else did it. It's that death causes it. And I think when we get to like causal experiences, then we're not actually looking for actionable reference. The law sometimes can become if you do this, you're a sinner. And I'm like, oh no, I think sinner is actually the title that reminds us that we have distanced ourselves from somebody today. And maybe that distance is actually from your own self. So let's say you're in a room by yourself. I'm not going to sin today, but you're sitting there going, I'm not really that great. And I don't really think very highly of myself, and I wish, I
Yeah.
could be as good a pastor as Nate, and I think nobody really wants me to be their pastor, and it's like how much sin is happening in that room
Yeah.
as you're firing out again and again and again these accusations against yourself, distancing yourself from God's view of you and like God's hope for your view of yourself.
And it's so like one of the weird things, it's really hard when people ask me like, do Lutherans believe in free will? Just like, well, kind of, because that's so like what you're describing there too is like we are helpless to it, and at least
Yeah.
we're willing to admit that, right? Like, yeah, you lock yourself in the room and you're like, I'm never gonna sin anymore. I was like, okay, like let's see how that goes for you, because you're right. Like soon it turns into self-loathing, and like you're separating. Love your Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Like there's also this inherent command in there to be loving of yourself and to be
Yeah.
caring for yourself.
Otherwise, you're
And
lowering the stages for other people. Because if I can say that on myself, then what do I get to say to you?
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
like then I'm just crappy to people, going like, well, I'm not being any nicer to myself, so you can't say I'm not following through. And it's like, I think we can.
Yeah. And just to be willing, like I find a great freedom in recognizing that. And like let's stop taking ourselves so seriously and thinking that we can get it all right all of the time. Like, oh my gosh, thank you. Finally, to hear someone say that to me, I feel so much better about all the mistakes that I've made in the past, and not to excuse them, but it's like, oh yeah, like everybody is struggling with this same mess of soup that it is to be human, and the self-loathing that comes with it, and the ego that comes with it. Like it's all happening all the time for everybody around you, but we just seem to never recognize that, right? Like I look at you, I'm like, oh, he's got it all together. Look at all the books on his shelf. Like
Yeah.
he's
All
so
those
well read.
unread books. So many paperweights. He purchased piles of paper to keep other papers from flying away. I don't know if he's a genius, but
But when he
he's
talks on the podcast, he sounds super smart. Like he knows this stuff way better than I do, right? Like I think we're always playing that game, and if we could like to recognize that getting it all perfect isn't actually possible, or really what this whole faith thing is about, right? Like it's about trusting in something bigger than yourself because you can't get it all right.
so we're in the midst of the World Cup as we're talking. And
Yes, we are.
can I make a World Cup comparison that I think actually
Oh,
will make
please.
sense? So the whole country, I think the whole world has fallen in love with one Erling Haaland, my Norwegian brethren. I don't look it, but I am Norwegian. And so I've fallen in love like so many others. And like, if you look at my Instagram, I'm getting more and more Haaland, Haaland, dun, 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 and I'm singing along. And one of the things that makes Haaland stand out to me, though, is football, has this innate thing that you have to wallow. If you step on my foot, I have to fall down, and then I grab my foot and I actually try to stop everything from going forward so that the whistle is blown, and I'll writhe and I'll look like I'm about to die. And then if
Oh.
the whistle is blown, and then everybody crowds around me, and then I go, oh, I think I can go on, and I limp, 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 and then I run off. And it's like, was that guy even injured at all?
Yeah.
And I sometimes find that Erling Haaland rarely goes down quickly. If he goes down, it's because he's actually been like truly slide tackled and hurt. He's not perfect. He's still a human being in this reference, so I'm not going to use him as a perfect resemblance. But there are so many videos of him like running through people where like others would have been touched and felt it and been like, this is where you flail and get that foul. And he was like, why would I get a foul? Like I can score a goal. And I think that one of the things the gospel does for us is that we don't actually need to sit and wallow. The temptation is that when you get nudged, with these sins, whether it's the sins that you are participating in, the sins that are being participated upon you, or the sin of the world, right? Which could just be, it's really hard to take a breath sometimes because every time I turn the news on, I have these images and they shame me and they make me angry and they make me frustrated. All of that stuff gives you any choice in that to be nudged and fall to the ground and wince and cry out and make the whole world stop on you, right? Like, Nate, you don't even know how hard my life is. Like, just like, don't leave this Zoom, like, focus on me. Or grace of God says, yes, I know that I'm being nudged. I know that I'm experiencing sin in the world at a constant rate because I am the one that does it. I'm the one that experiences it. And the world is making it happen all the time, these separations from God. But I don't have to go down. The grace of God reminds me that I actually can shrug most of it off. And that sometimes it does topple us. And we really do need to sit for a second and say, oh, I don't actually know what to do. But the fact that we sometimes live in a world that wants to say, sin touched me, I think the gospel is actually supposed to set us free to be like, I don't get thrown by sin as often as I used to because Paul reminds me that I live in a world where I don't do what I want to do and I don't do the things that I'm supposed to do. And that in this world, God's love has been constant. So rather than to drown in self-wallowing or to drown in the wrongdoings of others, I actually have an ability to view myself and others with the love of God. So that, like, Nate, you said some real mean stuff to me before this podcast started, and I can sit in it with anger, or I go, sometimes my brother sins just like I sin. And you go, and you know what, Alex, you said some things before this podcast started, and I'm pretty mad at you. But I'm going to recognize that I think that I'm going to use God's goggles of love and care and forgiveness to view the possibilities of what you might become. And so you view me as something far greater than I probably am because you're using God's imaging to see what God sees rather than to see, the world wants you to see all my flaws, you know, to challenge me and say, how many of those books have you actually read? And it looks like you didn't really comb your beard this morning. And what are you wearing? And why is it so tight fitting? Don't you feel like you should go work out more? Like, all of a sudden, it's like, if you want to rip me to shreds, you have every ability to do so, and to separate us and to try to help me separate myself from God and from my vision of myself and my relationship with you and others. Or you get to say, hey, how's it going? You're beautiful. You're awesome. I'm excited to be here. I'm so excited about the relationship that we get to build. And I wonder what God's going to do with this next hour. That ability to wander into, I wonder what God's going to do with me, with you, with this time. That to me is gospel strong versus law says, you know, the camera's going to be weird at some point. Something's going to break. You're going to say something I don't like. It'll probably not make sense. We can insert all that sin of, I don't expect much of this. But then there's God's view, like, which if you're going to quickly attach that to a gospel coming up, this Sunday is parable of the sower. Where does God throw the seed? Is it only to the spaces that look potentially good? Or does God throw the seed as the sower everywhere because everything's potentially good if seed lands on it? And it's like, that's a gospel narrative. But how do you get there?
It's so much more about, right? Like, none of it grows unless the sower throws the seed.
Right.
That's the part that we often forget. It's like, no, I just got to be good soil, right? Like, I remember this like kids song that I listened to growing up about being the good soil, blah, blah, blah. And that was very much the narrative of my youth.
Song. Sing that song.
I don't think I can pull it off. But what I like about what you're saying too, you know, like a gospel perspective, like you're saying, also frees you to see your brother, your neighbor, as someone who's doing the best they can, just like you. right? Like, so suddenly you're seeing them not with the judgment of all the law stuff, but it's like, oh gosh, right, like, yeah, some things could go wrong. The camera could be funny. Maybe you didn't actually read all those books. It's like, no, like, you're doing the best you can, and that's awesome. And I'm doing the best I can too. And let's see where this goes. I just think having that like gracious mindset for ourselves, it's really honestly like on a very personal level, I feel like I have developed so much greater compassion for anyone in my life the more I've dug into this particular aspect of like the Lutheran theology and the Lutheran witness. It's like, yeah, like I'm not, I can't do this on my own. I can't white knuckle it. I can't control it. It's not about my ego. And, when I look at people being a little wily around the edges, I'm like, you know what? Like, I kind of see where they're coming from. They're doing the best they can. This is a reaction to something else that's probably going on in their life. And they're just trying to hold on to this part the best they can. And I have so much greater compassion for them and what they're going through. But like, that's what that is, right? Like how the gospel works too, is it's not that you shouldn't do good deeds ever, but it's like, no, it opens your heart to live that way.
And to do them out of a gospel narrative, not a law narrative. Because I
Yeah.
think what this also means is it makes it quite communal. So I actually had a conversation right before this with one of my colleagues, and I said, if I want to announce myself as good soil, that's a beautiful internal thing, and I encourage you to do so. But if you announce yourself as good soil into, like, let's say I get up at church on Sunday and I go, I am good soil. And someone goes, he did not visit my mother last week. He is not good soil. And he was kind of short with me. He is not good soil. It really doesn't matter too much. In the world of perception is reality, being perceived as good soil is more important to me than the narrative of good soil. Now, if I get up and I say, I'm the rocky, thorny, paved over, places where the seed lands and rarely survives. But then you say, or those people in my church say, no, I see good soil. I see what God sees. It's an ability also to offer forgiveness and love and care. And if everyone's doing that to me and I'm doing it to them and they're doing it to each other, it'll get way healthier in a space when you hear somebody say, what I see is good soil, versus I think there are sometimes you go to churches and what you perceive is a bunch of people yelling, I'm good soil, but rarely do they look at each other and say, we're good soil.
Mm,
Or
yeah.
they announce this church in its
Yeah.
box is good soil. In the community around it is all rocks and thorns and paved over trash. And so we have to get out there and plant those seeds, versus I want to look out and see, and out there is good soil and over there is good soil, because anywhere where God's love can go, which is anywhere you can go, then what you're walking into is God's perceived good soil for each and every one of us, which is the love of God to send Jesus to be in this world with all that love and all that care and all that forgiveness, so that even death on a cross never separates us from the love of God. The beauty of Romans 7 is it's followed by Romans 8.
Yeah.
What a wretch am I moves Paul to say, nothing can separate us from the love of God. Neither life nor death, angels nor demons, nor any powers can ever separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. What an image to have a God who sees the best when sometimes you can only see the worst.
Mm.
And in that eternal conversation of what God has done for you, it's that God hasn't changed you. God is just seeing all your potential 24/7,
Yeah.
where sometimes you're only able to live in your realities of, I'm sad, I'm hateful, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm hurt. And God's like, and I see all the potential. So of course I'm going to throw seed over there, because I see that soil is ripe. Lord, I'm nothing right now. God says, that's not what I see.
Yeah.
I see something pretty amazing. And I think that's the gospel narrative that runs up against our law. And I think our law for us, especially in preaching, is trying to get people to go to a space, not to call themselves wretched like Paul, but to notice the I'm gonna die. And I think we talked
Mhm.
about this when I got to see you in person, but whether it's that, a plane comes crashing through my window in the next 5 seconds, or I live to be 125,
Yeah.
I'm going to die. And if I live in fear that I better keep being great because I don't know when death will come, I will get tired and I will live scared.
Yeah.
But if I recognize that the plane or the longevity is not really a determiner of my worth and my wealth in this life, then I let God greet me in that awareness of death will come and pull me into, yeah, but life is what sits on the other side of death, the promise of eternal life. And the promise of eternal life is a promise of love. And the promise of love is a promise of value. And if you can hold
Mm.
the way that God values you,
Yeah.
now your internal conversation is no longer what I didn't do and what I can't do and what I can't seem to get right. It's that God seemingly never sees anything less than love when looking at me. So in
Right.
this view of being loved, well, how will I then enact it into the world? And it's like, that's to me the most important part of preaching is if we don't go deep enough, we can't actually get lifted up. Because if it stays light, and we talked about this, I know for sure,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's the like, just don't be mean to your friends. And then like Jesus will be happy. And you're like, well, what does that mean? Like you can
Well,
only
what?
control what you can control. And all of a sudden it's like, it's all, and I'll be the first to say, because I feel strongly about it. It's all Joel Osteen stuff to me, where it's like, hey man, like, goodness is in you. So just be good. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, like goodness is in me, placed by the creator who continues to flood it with love and care amidst my like obvious disagreement in word and action.
Yeah.
But if you don't own that part, it's just like, I could be better. I'll be better tomorrow. And tomorrow I'll earn my spot in heaven. And tomorrow I will be good and people will call me good because they'll see that I am good. Versus, I like the idea of somebody seeing me at my worst and calling me good to the point where I might even get frustrated. Like, don't call me beautiful in my ugliness. Don't call me gracious in my stubbornness, because like it seems like you're negging me. And it's like, I'm not negging you. I'm seeing your potential. And like that's what God wants me to see. I don't want to see your murderousness. I want to see your ability to give life. I don't
Yeah.
want to see that you're a thief. I want to see your generosity. And you're like, yeah, but I'm not. And it's like, yeah, but God believes you're capable of it. So I'm going to believe it too. Like I'm going to use the love that I've experienced to try to love people in the way that I feel loved. Not, I'm going to love you because I'm going to make the world a better place. That's cute. But then if it's on my love, when I stop loving, the whole world fails.
And it's what people I think don't recognize in the moment is they're setting themselves up for despair.
Right.
When that equation falls apart, right? Like then what are you left with?
Jenga.
Yeah, Jenga. Exactly. Exactly.
Because as you
And
pull those blocks out,
what's most powerful, if you've ever experienced, is like when the people love you despite your mistakes. They
right.
accept you, they forgive you. Like that is often the most powerful transformative moment for an individual, is to still feel accepted, right? Like, and there's I think a lot about recovery and like something like AA, which seems to be one of the few places that has been really effective in treating alcoholism. And it's all built on this idea of acceptance. Like you go in and you say and you admit right away, like my name, I'm an alcoholic is the first thing that you say. That's step 0 in the
Right.
process. And you have this community that's willing to sit there and to listen to your stories and to allow you to be a part of the community despite all that you've done. And you actually like continue to share from, you know, this grief, this struggle, whatever it is, and continue to find acceptance in that place. Like, I think that's part of what has made those such successful, powerful, healing communities, is because of the inherent acceptance and forgiveness in those spaces, despite the sinfulness of the group, right? Like, whatever, however you want to term it, despite the disease, the struggle.
And like my mom was in Gamblers Anonymous, and I got to see some really amazing transformative stuff from, you know, the woman who's like, I'm not sure I have that much of a problem,
Mhm.
to this group is saving me, and then she ultimately passed away. But I remember I went to one meeting, and you know, and I think this is the same across the board. So like, you know, I think, you know, something like my mom would say like, my name is Susan, and I went to an open meeting to celebrate like one of her like milestones, and it was like,
Yeah.
and she's like, my name's Susan, and I'm I think like goes, I'm addicted to gambling. And then their response is like, hi Susan, you
Mhm.
know. So like the temptation, I think the world actually does this poorly, is we go, hi, my name's Alex, I'm addicted to wrongdoing, and they're like, hi wrongdoing, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. But
Yeah.
that group says, I didn't hear that second part, but I do know your name, and your name
Yeah.
matters.
Oh, that's so
And
good.
so what does it mean to say a confession of, I think I do this really, really poorly, and someone says like, well, good thing that's not your name, because your name is actually Nate, your name is Alex, your name is Susan. So tell me more, you know? And like, that's huge to me, that I say that I'm the problem. And then the response is, hi, name, not problem. So you let me give that confession, and then I hear back, I don't hear your confession. I hear what you are, you know?
Yeah.
And I think a name is pretty darn important. Um, and I think that name, I would argue, whether we like our name or not, our names are usually given to us with a lot of love, you know, named after people, names we like,
Yeah.
names we
Yeah.
cherish. You know, that child comes out and they go, who is this? And then they look down and they say, like, this is Rebecca and this is James. This is, you know, and all these names are coming out of these people's, but they're usually coming with love. And so, like, to hear your name, you know, after a confession, right? What a gift.
Well, I like to remind my wife that my name means gift of God. That doesn't go over well.
I mean, my name is Alexis LaChapelle, and Alexis means like protector, and then LaChapelle is French for the church or the chapel. And so
No
I'm like,
way.
literally, like my name is like protector of the church. I'm like, and it's like, you know, it's like I was never gonna be anything else. You know, thanks, mom. Why couldn't my name be like big money all the time? You know.
Well, here, I want to stop us there because my plan, Alex, is that we get on these podcasts regularly to talk through this type of stuff because I think, I don't know, again, I just am so committed to what this like unique little angle of the Lutheran Church and what we have to offer the world. And I love talking with you about it because you just have a way of putting these things that I think is so accessible to people and understanding what we're talking about. So I know you have a lot more to say, and we both could have a lot more to say, but we're going to bring you back on the regular to keep diving into this stuff. But before I cut us off, do you have any like closing thoughts you want to leave our listeners with? Big money.
Big money. Venmo me at no, I think, especially, you know, I told you that like I need to ground this in something. And so I as I prepare for Sunday, am thinking so much about the God who throws seed everywhere, because everything has potential. Like I want everyone to leave church
Mhm.
every week knowing that the potential that God sees for them, not like a sin law-based sermon is never enough, because the person just leaves dejected. And a gospel sermon, as beautiful as it is, makes the person feel exceptionally loved, but they haven't done any work. And so I want that law to mess you up a little bit, and to make you feel a little squirrely, a little scared. But then as long as that sermon ends with, here is God's vision of you, and it's so much better than you could ever have imagined. Go with the knowledge that God sees so much more. Like, that to me is such an important part of our Lutheran heritage, to be like,
Yeah.
there's a God that consistently sees way more than you could ever imagine for you, for me, for us. So I think that's the biggest thing, is like, as much as we talked about the sin and the separation and all those things that make us go, I'm never going to do good, am I? God's like, I don't live in that space. I want you to do work on yourself so that you can get out of it and know how to get out of it, which I think is what our sermons do, right? Is they predict that you're going to hit a hard time in the next week. So when you're on the rocky soil, when you're, in the thorns, I need you to be able to recognize that this is not you. This is an experience, and the you that God sees is the one that's getting hit with all that seed, because God's like, you're going to grow out of this. You're going to grow out of this.
And that God finds you in the rocky soil, right?
Right.
Like that, when you've reached that despair, those most difficult moments, that's where God promises to show up, right? Like, that's
Right.
what the cross points us to too. It's like, this is the space where God is promised to be.
Right.
It's not that God's not elsewhere, but like, yeah, when you're at your worst, that's where God pulls you out.
True. Also,
Alex, you're the best. I'm so grateful for our friendship. Thanks for taking the time to do this. And hey, listeners, thanks for listening or watching. Share with family and friends. As always, stay in peace.
Thank you for listening to the Together for Good podcast. If you'd like more resources for your walk of faith, please visit our website, bethany-denver.org, or download our mobile app by searching Bethany Connect in your phone's app store.